Everybody is looking for community, but are you willing to create one in order to help those who need it? If you don't know who I am already, my name is Michael Tabirade, and I help ambitious professionals navigate the change in this world in order for them to create a flourishing portfolio career. Now, I've previously been breaking down my 9 steps to building a portfolio career. And the first phase is all centered around the core foundations. So this is understanding your context, this is knowing your contracts, and this is making sure your cash is in order. The second phase is all centered around growth. This is developing the right content. This is becoming the coach that people need, and also developing the right community, which is what we're going to talk about today. And the third phase is all centered around codify, also capability, and the CEO mindset. And that's all centered around learning and scaling. And so when speaking about community, it's important for us to understand why people want it. And people want community because they want to feel heard, they want to feel they're in a safe space, and they want to, I guess, lean on someone or something or a group of people to work through life, essentially. So obviously, as you become a coach through all the content that you produce, more and more people want to know, like, and trust you. They want to engage with you. And so essentially community comes from engagement, communication, etc., etc. So you'll see this evidence through more likes, more shares, but more importantly, more comments. So I would say one of the biggest things that you need to bear in mind developing your community is making sure that you have an opportunity to respond to people's comments. Okay, engage with people. Don't just throw things out there and then they respond back and then you say nothing. I'm guilty of doing this myself. I'm still working on this, so I've got a lot to do. It's not easy, but it can be done. And so one way I'm trying to improve this is using speech to text software. So I use something called Voice Notes. So voicenotes.com, you can check it out, and that allows me to just say what's on my mind, and then it'll be written out, and then I make a few changes here and there. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is that actually you do build a community in public. It doesn't have to be private. Okay, so for me, my public community is YouTube and LinkedIn, more specifically. I would say probably more so YouTube than LinkedIn right now. And actually I've designed it that way because there's free reign. You know, if somebody leaves me a comment, I'm happy to answer that comment publicly. Okay, but obviously there's no sort of like jurisdiction in terms of how long I should take and all of that kind of jazz there. Ideally, however, it's best to respond as soon as you can. Okay, that could look like straight away on the day. That could look like within a week's time. Whatever that rhythm looks like for you, do it. Okay, do it. And so think of your social media and your other SEO platform like YouTube as your public community. Now, when thinking about a private community, in my mind at least anyway, that's typically going to be paid. Now, not everyone has a paid private community, but I'm just, again, using my analogy. I've got the public one already, which is the socials. The private one's going to be paid, and that's going to be at a certain tier. And so you need to think to yourself already, like, what will people want within a private paid community? So this is where you have to start speaking to people. Maybe you get some ideas from your coaching clients. Maybe you've got some ideas from content that people are engaging with a lot. Maybe you're thinking about things that you needed at some point. Okay. You also want a bit of a structure and a rhythm. So again, are you going to have weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly workshops and Q&A sessions? Are you going to have resources or templates that people can utilize? Are you going to have guest appearances or specialists come in and talk to your community? There has to be an organic way for people to engage, so it feels like, you know, they're just not in there just being fed information all the time. And of course, it's not just a promotion site for your stuff. This is an opportunity for people to, again, like I said, feel like they're in a safe space, get the information they need, and feel part of something bigger than what they're usually part of in their external worlds. So these are all things that you need to curate and create, so to speak. Now, of course, there's also training modules as well. And, you know, some people are like, they need to get the training modules up and running before, you know, they set up the community, but you can't think like that. Sometimes there are situations where you create the community first before you even necessarily build anything else. Now, I had a private community. It was not paid, it was a free one. And I was kind of doing it charitably because over the pandemic, it was difficult for people to function and all that kind of stuff there. So it's called the Personal Development Hangout. I had a session every single week, and I'd say anywhere between 4 to 15 people would join every single week without fail. And we'll talk about personal development topics centered around leadership, resilience, the workplace and career, all of this kind of stuff, many, many different topics. And it worked a charm. I promoted it on LinkedIn and Instagram. It was on Eventbrite, so people could check in that way. It was hosted on Mighty Networks. So there were all these different ways in which people were able to join. So think about all of this kind of stuff there. Now, of course, speaking to different people, you'll learn things about what is required for your community. And of course, you can actually do things where you have let's say, for example, a Google survey or some sort of questionnaire that people can take so you can gain insights. But how do you actually host your community? Well, there are a number of ways. I know most people know about School. There are things like Mighty Networks and Circle. Of course, there are plays in the game that have been around for a while, such as Podia, Thinkific, and I think it's Teachable as well. So these are all different ones that you can utilize. You can create your own community using WordPress or getting a developer to do this for you. If you are using WordPress, you can use plugins to do some of this stuff. So that's another way in which you can think about it, especially if you want to keep a certain type of brand as opposed to doing something or utilizing a hosting platform that's already done for you. And the other thing that you can do is if you are a YouTube creator and you've got 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours watch time, you can actually use the membership/community function where you have paid private members. And again, you can use that whole sort of suite there to generate income or revenue and provide value for your audience as well. In addition to things like Patreon, which is another way of doing it before this was actually a feature on YouTube. And finally, you can actually use email. You can send people emails every single week, or you can send people emails every 2 weeks or whatever it may be. This could be a paid subscription. And actually, even if you want to do sort of like calls and all that kind of stuff there, you can send the link to the Zoom call or the Google Meet call to the community members and they can join that way. And so there are so many ways in which you can do it. It doesn't have to be a specific way. When it comes to email providers, you can utilize MailerLite. So that's a great way to get started. If you're using something like Kajabi, which is a whole suite of different stuff, they have their own emailing system. Proton's another sort of system you can utilize, which is more bespoke by nature, depending on your expertise. And you've also got Substack, which is a great way to get started because it has not only the whole newsletter thing, but you've also got podcasts set up on there as well, amongst many other things. And you can also charge in there as well. So these are great ways to get started. Of course, with any sort of thing that you do develop, then and there is some sort of like private gate towards it where you have to exchange your personal information such as your email address as a primary thing, and then secondary maybe your name, and then possibly other additional information too. There has to be integration between that email provider and I guess the tool that they're buying or the service that they're buying, etc., etc. So for example, if someone is booking a call with me, there is something that I've set up where they will be added to my email list, and that will be on the agreement, and I can tell them that as well and all that kind of jazz. So these are all different ways in which you can do it. And so these integrations will rely on things like Zapier, which has been in the game for a while but more pricier compared to the others I'm going to mention. There's also Pabbly Connect, there's Make.com, and there's Na10 as examples, all different ones that I've used myself apart from Make.com. So thinking about this, you start to think a bit more strategically. When you're thinking about the community, the public one that you provide on YouTube, LinkedIn, and all those different ones there, people may want more from you. So this is where you think about the whole free gift thing, or free template, something of value that people can actually use. So I know for me, people like using my CV template. And so that takes them into my email provider, my email list, and they may get a sequence of emails which they can be entertained by, they can learn from, they can be empowered by. And if they want, I'm going to offer them something that they may be interested in as well. Okay, so you can check out all of this stuff. I think there is I've forgotten his name, but there's Jeff Walker who came up with these concepts of how to think about email, and there's also the one funnel away guy. I've forgotten his name. He's got a whole bunch of books centered on this stuff. So if you want to learn about that stuff, you can read those books in more detail. So I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about. But essentially, you have to think, when you think about community, think about public and private. Also think about campaigns. So what sort of like campaign are you drawing someone into? And also think about the ecosystem that you're trying to build. You know, how are people going to move through your sort of like, I don't want to say funnel, it is an ecosystem, because essentially this public community that you have, let's say it's YouTube, you can funnel them into a paid community which is private, and that's at one tier, and then the next tier could be, okay, this is more one-to-one plus the group sort of like thing when it comes to a membership. So hopefully that gives you an idea. I guess the final thing I want to say is that you don't have to be the lead. You can start off being the face. Don't get that twisted. But you can rely on others to be more of the lead and actually set the example in terms of how community is run and set the culture, because you all have terms in terms of how the community is run. But really, you're going to attract people who think they're like you, or who are like you, or who want to be like you in some way, shape or form. So if you get those early adopters, then they're going to emulate your sort of characteristics as well and take that charge. So it's about fostering a culture that makes sense. So hopefully I've given you some ideas around community and what you can think about for yourself. If you want to see more things centered around independent consulting and also anything centered around portfolio careers, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach and expand. Peace.